Hello everyone, I'm Autobot Sonic the Telltale Gamer, bringing latest and everything Telltale games, Transformers, and more. So wow, they thought it would be quite a few more months before we actually heard anything about this, but today Hasbro has revealed at the New York Toy Fair the very first trailer for the Transformers War for Cybertron trilogy Netflix series that will be coming out this summer on Netflix. Now, this animated series was announced all the way back in February of last year when Hasbro announced that they would be working with Rooster Teeth to create a animated Netflix series based off the newest line of Transformers toys, which is the War for Cybertron trilogy line. This trailer that Netflix showed off at the New York Toy Fair, it seems to be based off the first toy line that was released as part of this War for Cybertron toy line, which is Siege. Now, as the title of the series implies, the War for Cybertron trilogy will be broken down into 3 parts or seasons. Now, as I said before, Rooster Teeth is helping produce this series, but not only is Rooster, for those Rooster Teeth is of course the very popular web series company that has been known for creating the web series Ruby, Red vs. Blue, and Genlock. And as fans of all 3 of those, I'm really excited to see what Rooster Teeth does with Transformers. But not only that, they are also getting help from Polygon Pictures, who, for those who don't know, not only did they help out with another Netflix series called Knights of Sidonia, but they also actually did the animation for Transformers Prime over 10 years ago. So it's nice to see that we've got Rooster Teeth working with the animators of Transformers Prime to create this brand new Netflix series. Now, apparently it seems the War for Cybertron, at least this first season, according to this trailer that was just dropped by Netflix, as well as some articles, that the War for Cybertron trilogy Part 1, which they're calling Siege, based off the toy line of the same name, will take place during the final days of the War for Cybertron, and will basically be the Autobots as sort of like a resistance group against the Decepticons, who have essentially taken over all of Cybertron. So before we go into analyzing the actual War for Cybertron Siege trailer, I thought I might talk about the actual casting for War for Cybertron trilogy. So for War for Cybertron, our main cast, for our main 2 characters, Megatron and Optimus, Megatron will be voiced by Jason Marnocha, who you may recognize previously voiced Megatron in the not so good Transformers Prime Wars Machinima series that included Combiner Wars, Titans Return, and Power of the Primes. But arguably, Jason Marnocha's take on Megatron was a really good part of a otherwise mediocre series, definitely. And voicing Optimus actually is Jake Tillman, who you may recognize as the voice of Optimus in Transformers Cyberverse, which is still going on. And now, I wasn't too fond of Jake Tillman's Cyberverse voice as Optimus in Transformers Cyberverse, honestly, but after seeing this trailer, I think his War for Cybertron Optimus voice has changed a lot. I haven't seen seasons 2 or 3 of Cyberverse yet to see if Jake Tillman's Optimus voice in that has changed at all, but his voice in Cyberverse isn't actually that bad. It's clearly still a Peter Cullen impersonation, but it's a good Peter Cullen impersonation, in my opinion, an adequate one. Moving on to our rest of our main cast are some people we have voicing Alita 1, Lindsay Rousseau, who is fairly new into the voice acting business. I've tried looking her up on IMDb. She hasn't really done, aside from a few minor roles, she hasn't really done anything major. But moving on from her, going into the voice of Bumblebee, actually, is none other than Joe Zeha. And for any of you Fire Emblem fans, you'll automatically recognize Joe Zeha as the voice of course, Claude in Fire Emblem 3 Houses. So, of course, we're having Claude as the voice of Bumblebee. So I think that is both hilarious and awesome, because as a big fan of Fire Emblem 3 Houses, I absolutely loved Joe Zeha's performance as Claude in the game. So to have him bringing his voice to Bumblebee in this War for Cybertron Netflix series, I think is going to be really good. Along with that, we also have some other returning voice actors from previous Transformers works. We have Frank Todaro returning to voice Starscream after previously having voiced him in the Prime Wars Machinima series. And along with that, Sophia Isabella will be voicing RC. Now, interesting enough, unlike Frank Todaro, Jason Marnocha, and Jake Tillman, who all previously voiced earlier versions of those characters, Sophia Isabella did not actually voice any other version of RC, but she actually voiced Windblade in Transformers Cyberverse. And now, I was a big fan of Sophia Isabella's interpretation of Windblade in Cyberverse, so it's interesting to see whether she'll just copy her Windblade voice for RC, or if she's got a new RC voice for Windblade. I'm interested to see where they go with her. Along with that, we also have some other voices. We have Raphael Goldstein as Ratchet, Bill Rogers as Wheeljack, and Sean Sean Hawkins as Mirage, and Kaiser Johnson as Ironhide. All of these actors have mostly done just shorts like live action stuff or very minuscule voice acting roles, so I couldn't really find anything about them. Moving on from that, though, we have Edward Bosco as the voices of both Ultra Magnus and Soundwave. For those who don't know, Edward Bosco recently voiced Alastor in the very popular YouTube cartoon Has Been Hotel. So I think it's really funny knowing who Alastor is, having the voice of him voice Soundwave, who is essentially like big on radios and technology like Alastor was in Has Been Hotel. I think that's actually really hilarious. On top of that, we also have Todd Haberkorn coming in to voice Shockwave and Red Alert. Todd Haberkorn is a big name in the anime industry. You may recognize him as the voice of Marlowe in Hunter x Hunter, Shikadai in Boruto, or Jocko in Dragon Ball Super, among other roles. We also have Keith Silverstein coming in to voice Jetfire, who you may recognize as the voice of Torbjorn in Overwatch. For any Telltale fans, you recognize him as the voice of Chef God Omar in The Walking Dead the final season, and of course he also voiced Speedwagon in parts 1 and 2 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Finally, rounding out the cast, we have Mark Whitten as the voice of Sideswipe and Skywarp, who previously voiced Sedeth, also in Fire Emblem Three Houses like Joseha's Bumblebee. And finally, we have Miles Luna playing both Teletran 1 and Cliffjumper. Now, obviously, being this a Rooster Teeth production, of course Miles Luna has to voice someone, having previously done a lot of voice work for other Rooster Teeth roles who you may recognize most likely as Felix in Red vs. Blue and Jean in Ruby, who are two of my favorite characters in both of those series. So I'm interested to see what Miles Luna does as Teletran 1 and Cliffjumper. I think he can definitely do that. Now, now we don't necessarily have an exact release date yet for the Prime Wars, for War for Cybertron, but an earlier press release by Hasbro a couple weeks ago said that the series was expected to be released sometime in June, if not definitely in the summer. So I'm hoping we're going to see more of this series soon, because I can't wait to see what's going to go down from the looks of it. So in this article that Entertainment Weekly posted about the War for Cybertron Netflix series, they said that the Season 1, or Chapter 1, which they're calling Siege, will be 6 episodes long, each one being about 22 minutes long. So we're looking at sort of very short seasons. I was kind of hoping we'd maybe have at least 10 episodes, but maybe we'll have like a Voltron where maybe the first season is only 6 episodes, but then when we get to the next 2 parts, it'll be longer. Though then again, the Prime Wars Machinima series weren't really that long either, and I'm really hoping that this War for Cybertron series isn't like so rushed as the Prime Wars series. That's my biggest hopes. The animation in this looks incredible, but I'm just really, really hoping that the plot doesn't suffer from that. But that's all pretty much we learned so far from the Entertainment Weekly article about War for Cybertron. But now we're going to look at the actual trailer for Chapter 1 called Siege. So let's go ahead and take a look at that and see what we can learn from it.
Cybertron is in ruins. I fear war is lost. Optimus, at this moment we must focus on surviving as a race, not winning a war.
Yet again, the Autobots have escalated this conflict to the point where we must answer their aggression with force. I empower you, Decepticons, to bring this painful chapter of our history to a close.
We are facing extinction at the hands of the Decepticons.
Cybertron needs strength. My strength. Cybertron needs freedom. We must not allow Megatron to find the Allspark. With it, he will destroy everything we are.
You're fighting to win, and that's gonna get you all killed.
The Autobots fight for the day we no longer have to fight.
This was not the life I imagined for us.
It's a life worth fighting for.
So the trailer starts off essentially with a little narration by Optimus, basically explaining the plot of the show, for lack of better terms. Basically, he says how it's towards the end of the war for Cybertron. The Autobots are losing really badly against Decepticons, and that the war may already been lost. And as he says this, we see a little nice shot of a bunch of Seekers flying over towards Cybertron, and one of them gets shot down, but not before another one, who I think may be Skywarp, transforms and jumps down to land in front of Bumblebee and Wheeljack. Now, Bumblebee and Wheeljack show up together a lot throughout the course of this trailer, so be sure to keep an eye on this so we can try and piece this scene together and see exactly what happens. After that scene comes, we cut to a little conversation between Ultra Magnus and Optimus, with Ultra Magnus basically stressing to Optimus that they should think about maybe just evacuating Cybertron, and instead of trying to focus on winning the war, but just try to survive as a species. And while Optimus looks really conflicted by this, we get some other stuff after a little cut in, basically doing some opening credits. We have a shot of Megatron presumably addressing a bunch of other Decepticons in this big Coliseum area that looks very much like the Coliseums from Cyberverse, from the little bit I remember watching it last year, or 2 years now. Megatron is discussing this, and behind Megatron you can actually see what looks like to be Starscream and Jetfire behind him. Now, of course, those who don't remember, Jetfire in most Transformers lore was originally a Decepticon before becoming an Autobot, so it'll be interesting to see if we'll see Jetfire become a Autobot by the end of this season, which, if the trailer is going the way I think it is, it may very well be so. So, while Megatron is giving his speech, we actually see a shot of a hooded figure approaching this facility, this stadium where Megatron's giving his speech, and it's kind of hard to see his face based on the cloak he's wearing, but the shoulder pads immediately give it away that this is Ultra Magnus, interestingly enough, going to see Megatron and the rest of the Decepticons. Now, it's really interesting to see that Ultra Magnus is really feeling conflicted with Optimus, because aside from, as far as I remember, Transformers Prime, in both the IW continuity and the G1 continuity, Ultra Magnus was devoted to Optimus, essentially basically his number 2. So to see Ultra Magnus go behind Optimus' back to, I'm not sure if he's straight out defecting to the Decepticons, but he may be just trying to strike a deal with Megatron, just for mercy or something like that. But as we can see here, we see this hooded figure who is almost certainly Ultra Magnus going to see Megatron. We can see a bunch of other Decepticons beside him. We see Skywarp, Starscream, and Jetfire to his left, and then to his right we see Shockwave, Soundwave, and the small mech between Megatron and Soundwave is actually Barricade, who is essentially the Decepticon equivalent of Prowl. Basically, she looks straight up just like Prowl, but with a black and purple paint scheme instead of a white and red paint scheme. Now, after that, we get a bunch of very quick flurry shots right after this, so pay attention to these. The first shot we have looks like a continuation of the shot before we saw Skywarp jump in front of Bumblebee and Wheeljack. We have here Jetfire presumably attacking Starscream, I believe, and I believe this may be the moment where Jetfire actually defects to the Autobots. It looks like you can see Thundercracker and Skywarp to the left of Starscream, and it looks like Optimus is to the right of Bumblebee and Wheeljack. So maybe this plays into a scene that shows up later on, so that during this big confrontation between the Decepticons and Autobots, Jetfire decides to defect to the Autobots and attack Starscream here. After that, we get a quick shot of some unknown Autobot who I think may be Hound and Sideswipe running away from a bunch of blaster fire. The one on the left is definitely Sideswipe, but I'm not sure so much about the one on the right. I think it might be Hound based on the way I remember him looking in G1, but I'm not too sure. After that, we have a very quick shot of Chromia, who makes her first appearance in this trailer, as well as Barricade leaping out of this cloud of smoke to punch Chromia down. And then, interestingly enough, we have a shot of Impactor seemingly getting crushed by rubble. Now, if you don't know who Impactor is a former Decepticon who, in most continuities, defects to the Autobots, most notably in the IW continuity, or the old IW continuity, I should say, in which that he was one of Megatron's best friends before the war for Cybertron, and then eventually defected to join the Autobots, specifically the Wreckers. So it's interesting to see, this is the first time outside of the IW comics that Impactor has actually been in a story in Transformers, specifically the first time also that Impactor has been in a Transformers cartoon. So it's interesting to see how Impactor will factor into this Transformers series, and whether or not Impactor actually dies in this shot. I don't think Impactor's dying, but who knows, we may see something happen with Impactor. After that, we see a shot of who I believe to be Hound driving out of the rubble of what MLBB, Impact, or maybe he's like rescuing Impact or something. We hear a little monologue from Megatron talking about how his plans to conquer Cybertron, and I gotta see these close-ups of Megatron and Bumblebee and Wheeljack in the scene after that. It's really cool to see like how gritty like all these characters look. It's clearly G1 inspired. Their designs are heavily based off the toys of the same toy line, but it's interesting to see how gritty each of them. It takes me back to the feel of Transformers Prime, which, funny enough, that this December will be the 10th anniversary of Transformers Prime. So we see this shot of Bumblebee and Wheeljack again with a bunch of Seekers, and Megatron's still narrating. We see who I believe to be a Skywarp or Thundercracker. It's kind of hard to tell with how dark the colors are, but I think this is Thundercracker punching Wheeljack down as Bumblebee looks. He's surrounded by a bunch of other Seekers as well, who I believe may include Starscream and Skywarp. After that, we have a quick shot of Alita 1 presumably battling Megatron, as we see here Megatron turning into a tank and firing, and then Alita running away from the sniper position she has away from presumed Megatron's blast. And then after that, we cut back to the scene of Bumblebee and Wheeljack surrounded by Starscream and the rest of the Seekers. We can clearly see Skywarp, Starscream, and Thundercracker on the right, and I think that may be Skywarp on the left, or Megatron. Now, it's really interesting to see that the device behind Bumblebee and Wheeljack here is actually a space bridge, very similar to the design of space bridges in the Cyberverse continuity, actually. So it's nice to see that the War for Cybertron is taking some references from other Transformers continuities and not just making stuff up, or taking stuff directly just from this toy line. And then as Bumblebee and Wheeljack are surrounded by all these Decepticons, we see Optimus come out of this giant pile of smoke from this cloud and basically just run over some of the Seekers before jumping in front of Bumblebee and Wheeljack to fight off Megatron and everyone else. And it's really like the fluidity of all this, it really reminds me of Transformers Prime's fluidity. Not only that though, it does kind of have a feel of the fight scenes of Genlock and later seasons of Ruby, which makes sense of course since Rooster Teeth is helping out Polygon Pictures with the animation and production of this series, and it's kind of a nice mix of both Transformers Prime, Ruby, and Genlock. So I'm really hoping to see that that's reflected in the fight scenes. And if the way the fight scenes, a little bit of the fight scenes we've seen in the show already based off this trailer, then I have no doubt this is going to have a very big influence from Ruby and Genlock. Maybe more so Genlock than Ruby, but we'll see. Immediately after that scene, we get a shot of Starscream, Megatron, and Jetfire running after who I assume is Optimus, Bumblebee, and Wheeljack, just based off their little designs and differences. They're running after them before they're knocked back by a bunch of explosions. And then, while this is happening, we see after that a shot of Ultra Magnus looking really conflicted. I think this may be like right before he decides to go out and strike a deal with Megatron, or maybe even defect to Decepticons. I think making a deal with Megatron is much more likely because I don't see Ultra Magnus as be willing to betray Optimus. But if that's the case and that he really is going to defect Decepticons, I'm all for that. I'm all for trying new stuff. And during all these shots, while Optimus seems to be looking back at Ultra Magnus, we hear Optimus talking about how Megatron is currently seeking out the Allspark for whatever reason, and that he's going to use it to basically wipe out the Autobots, which is nothing new we've really known. This is like typical Megatron Transformer story. Megatron wants the Allspark to stop the Autobots. The Autobots want to stop Megatron from getting the Allspark. It's basically the Bayverse movies and Cyberverse all over again. After that, we get another couple quick shots of who I believe to be Hound knocking back Barricade. Maybe this is after the scene right after the scene where Barricade is fighting Chromia. We have a quick shot of Optimus battling some more Seekers, which may be part of the scene where he and Hound may be going after Barricade to save Chromia from him. After that, we get a brief look, which I assume this may be based on the lighting and all that, the same scene where Bumblebee and Wheeljack and Optimus are fighting against Jetfire, Starscream, and the rest of the Seekers. We have this shot of Optimus and Megatron fighting, very inspired by Ruby and Genlock, in my opinion, so I'm really happy about that. But as they're fighting, we cut to a very quick shot of an unknown mech or Decepticon punching Optimus' face. I can't tell who he is, so feel free to leave in the comments if any of you know who he is. We then cut to the one time Bumblebee speaks in this trailer, which really has me interested, with Bumblebee basically like cursing, like basically just calling Optimus out that you're gonna get everyone killed if you just keep fighting. So that kind of goes back to what Ultra Magnus was saying to Optimus, basically about that the Autobots should focus more on just surviving rather than winning this war. So it's interesting to see like how like this dynamic is, and I'm all for Bumblebee being more like resistant or like defiant to Optimus, kind of like how he was to him in Robots in Disguise. And it's really because it's nice to see Bumblebee evolve more from just the young plucky Autobot who's always follows Optimus like a father figure. It's nice to see Bumblebee finally grow into his own character for once, and if that's the role, the case that they're going for with this version of Bumblebee, I'm all for it. And of course, Joe Zeha does a really, really good job as Bumblebee in this very, very brief line. But as Bumblebee keeps talking, we see this one shot of Optimus driving away with Chromia and this other mech who looks to be dead, laying beside Chromia on back of Optimus. I'm not sure if this is Ultra Magnus or some other Autobot or Decepticon. It looks like Ultra Magnus based on the looks of his color scheme, but the shoulders don't match Ultra Magnus. So unless he gets some sort of damage done or an upgrade, I think this might just be a random Autobot to just show, oh, war is hell and all that stuff. But then we have a shot, interesting enough, of Sideswipe equipping these big giant shoulder cannons and launching them at 2 of 3 refractors. Now, of course, the refractor is the trio of Decepticons that had the ability to transform into like a camera back in the G1 cartoon. So it's nice to see that we have all these old school Decepticons and Autobots that haven't really had any real significance in more recent Transformers entries come back to have more of a spotlight. I'm pretty sure this scene of Sideswipe using these like giant shoulder-mounted rockets, I think those are like an add-on his toy has. But of course, I don't collect the toys. But from like screenshots I've seen the toys, I think they're part of the toy. So it's a nice little way to incorporate stuff from the toys into the show. After that, we have another shot of Chromia battling some Seekers. Maybe this is right before or after the scene where she's fighting Barricade. We then cut back more to the scene of Megatron, now confirmed to be with Jetfire, Starscream, and the other Seekers, battling Bumblebee, Wheeljack, and Optimus at the Space Bridge. Something tells me this will be the very first episode or the very last episode of the season. I don't know. There's something about it screams like, okay, big opening fight or big ending fight, honestly, in my opinion. But then we get another shot of Optimus battling that unknown Decepticon from before, this time of Optimus punching him back. So I'm not exactly sure who this Decepticon is. So if any of you know who it is, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. After that, we have a brief little scene between Optimus and Alita, with Alita basically showing doubts of her role in joining the Autobots. And I'm like, for never hearing Lindsay Russo's voice in anything before, I actually really dig, like, she's doing a good job as Alita 1, and it's kind of different from the way other female Transformers actresses have done in the past, specifically with Sophia Isabella's Windblade and Deanna McGovern's Shadow Striker. Well, I think they do great voices. Their voices are a little too similar, so I'm happy that Lindsay Russo is distancing herself from other previous Transformers VAs and making her own like unique voice of Alita 1. And after that, we see this shot of Alita 1 running alongside another unknown Autobot. Maybe it's like just like a disposable Autobot, or it could just be someone else. They're fighting another 2 refractor units before we see a bunch of other quick shots of Optimus battling the other Seeker, Megatron just banging down Optimus, and then before Optimus just gives one last words to Alita, and then the trailer ends there. And yeah, so that's pretty much everything we know so far about Transformers War for Cybertron Part 1 Siege. As I said before, it seemed the release date is unknown yet, but according to some earlier announcements, the first season may be released sometime in June of this year. If not, definitely this summer. So are you guys excited for the first part of this Transformers Netflix series and the first real Transformers show since Cyberverse? If you are, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys later.